Welcome to Education Leadership for a Digital World, funded by the Wallace Foundation in collaboration with Digital Promise. I'm Jackie Wilson, Executive Director of the National Policy Board for Educational Administration and the Director of the Delaware Academy for School Leadership at the University of Delaware. I'm joined by my co-moderator and colleague, Gary Bloom, a consultant and author of numerous books and articles related to coaching-based supervision of school leaders. We have an expert panel joining us for this discussion. Joining us today is Edwin Casada, Superintendent of Yonkers, New York School District, Narissa Lewis, Assistant Superintendent of Greenville, South Carolina County School District, and Jay Camarino, Assistant Superintendent, Long Beach, California Unified School District. I'm going to ask each panel member to tell you a little bit about the work they do with principals and to provide some demographic information about the district where they work to get us started today. Edwin?
Well, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you, Jackie. It's great working with you. It has always been great working with you, and how wonderful it is to be able to join this illustrious panel on this important conversation. So in terms of the district, I am the superintendent of the Yonkers Public Schools in New York. It is the fourth largest district in New York State. And in my opinion, it is the most successful urban district in the country. I think as superintendents, we need to be extremely proud of the work that we do on behalf of our students, and I am very proud of the work that we do here in Yonkers. You know, when you think of the city of Yonkers, we are educating over 32,000 urban students, and that includes the non-public and the parochial schools. As it relates to our students in the public schools, a little bit over 27,000 students, including students who are age 3. We have pre-K through 12 grade students. Close to 74% of our students are economically disadvantaged. 19% are students with disabilities, and 13% are multilingual learners. We have an extremely diverse school district where 58% of our students are Latino, 18% are Black or African American, and then we have the United Nations, I would say, in all of our schools because of the many different faces that we have. We are a district that is moving forward. I have been the superintendent now for 5 years. When I took over the district, the graduation rate is high 60. Now for the past 3 years, the graduation rate has exceeded 85%, and we are extremely proud of that. A lot of work goes into moving the agenda in an urban school, and certainly supervising our principals effectively, which means providing the right coaching and the right support is what allows for us to move this district forward. I have been working on improving principal leadership now for the past 10 years, I would say. I was a principal for 10 consecutive years, and I was a principal of a high school for 9 consecutive years. And I realized that the only way that I was going to move the agenda in the high school was by improving my practices. So for me, the principal is as important as anyone in the school district. And in order for you to improve your practices, you have to learn and identify coaches that will be able to assist you in this process. Thank you, Jack.
Thank you so much, Edwin. And now we'll hear from Narissa Lewis, Assistant Superintendent from Greenville County School District. Narissa, you're muted.
Hello, everyone. I am Narissa Lewis from Greenville County Schools located in Greenville, South Carolina. I'm excited to be here with you today and talk about principal supervision. To tell you a little bit about Greenville County, we serve approximately 77,000 students, making us the 44th largest district in the United States and the largest district in the state of South Carolina. We have approximately 10,000 employees, and I am one of the assistant superintendents over elementary schools. We have 51 elementary schools, so I am fortunate to supervise 17 school principals at the elementary level. To talk a little bit about our work with our principals, we are, as previously stated, working on have a plan for developing our principals through a coaching model. It has been very rewarding for both the principals as well as the supervisors, because we are all continuous learners and we're all focused on making sure that we are doing things on better. So again, I'm excited to be with you here on today. I think there's a second slide, Jackie, that just gives a little bit more information about our school district. And thanks again for the opportunity.
Thank you, Narissa. And now we'll introduce Jay Camarino, who's the Assistant Superintendent in Long Beach Unified School District. He'll talk about his district.
Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are in the country. Sorry, it's okay. You don't have to see me. My camera is fine to be off, but no, here I am. Again, an honor to be a part of this group. Long Beach Unified School District is located in California. We are 25 miles south of Los Angeles, and we are comprised of 83 schools. 45 are elementary. We have 8 K-8 schools, 1 K-12 school, 15 middle, 11 high schools, and 3 alternative high schools. Our demographic is that we are at enrollment of 71,800 students. We used to be an enrollment 15 years ago of 99,000 students. So you can tell, like in most of our large cities around the country, we are losing a lot of our residents to increased housing market, which has really moved a lot of our families out to surrounding suburban areas. And our demographic of our school district is we have 57% Latinx students, 12% African American, and 12% white. We have 60% EO, 90% EL, and we have a 69% free and reduced population in our schools. We can go to the next slide, please. As I've mentioned, we are the 4th largest district in the state of California. We were the 3rd largest largest school district in California. But like Dr. Quesada said too, I too work for the best urban school district in the nation. Funny that we're on different ends of the coast, but we both work for the best urban school districts in the nation, I guess, and proud of that. We have 10,000 certified and classified employees. We're the largest employer in our city. We have 5 board members and over 10 years of tenure, and we have an 84.8% graduation rate that will move up. My position is I am the assistant superintendent of high schools. Our colleagues and I have one principal supervisor beneath me called a director. Our middle school K-8 team has 1 assistant superintendent of middle and K-8 with 1 director that supervises principals. And then our elementary assistant superintendent had 3 directors that supervise principals. Now he's down to 2. So in total, we have a population of 7 principal supervisors in Long Beach.
Thank you so much, Jay. Now, I have the advantage of have worked with all 3 school districts, and I have to say you're all the best. So that is why you're on this webinar today with Gary and I. So I'd like to get us started with our discussion by having several framing questions for you to think about. And I'm hoping by the end of this webinar today that your questions are going to be answered. So as Gary and I began thinking about what we hoped you would get out of this webinar, we thought about these questions. What do great supervisors of principal supervisors do? How do they supervise in a virtual environment? What tools are being used to help with supervision of principal supervisors? How can using the model standards for principal supervisors provide a foundation for the work with principal supervisors and principals? So hopefully by the time we get through this discussion, you'll be able to answer all these questions. Next slide. So I want to start by talking just a little bit about the research. I've had the opportunity to work with the Wallace Foundation for over 2 decades, and there are some things that I have learned. And one of those is that effective education leadership really matters. It matters to teachers, it matters to students, caregivers of our students, and our communities. So over 20 years of research and organizational experience have taught us a great deal about what makes effective school leadership. We know that highly effective school leaders get results regardless of circumstances, but having supportive policies and practices and conditions enable principals to have a greater effect and a greater change on behalf of students. We know that there's a deep knowledge base about those policies and practices at both the state and local levels that do have the potential to either aid or impede the school leader's success. 2 of the practices that we are going to discuss today are standards and principal supervisors. We know that leadership matters in our schools and across the country. We have learned that one highly effective assistant principal or principal amplifies the impact of effective teachers. Leaders can have a stronger effect on all students because the leader has an impact on all the teachers in the school. As you see here on this slide, that you multiply your impact one principal or assistant principal can have on the teaching staff, because principals attract great teachers. Great principals attract great teachers, and great teachers improve the teaching and learning outcomes for students. Next slide. So I want to thank the Wallace Foundation for identifying the problems with education reform and providing opportunity for districts to improve their school leadership pipelines in over 30 states that are engaged in trying some promising practices when it comes to school leadership. So today we're going to hear from a panel, next slide, that includes a superintendent and 2 assistant superintendents who understand the importance of strong principal leadership. They understand that districts need a strategy to develop a principal pipeline so that all schools in the district have an effective principal and assistant principal leading school improvement efforts. There are 7 domains of principal pipelines. Next slide. Those 7 domains begin with a set of standards, either standards that the district and or the state has identified as the standards for ed leadership. They include pre-service preparation for leaders, selective hiring and placement, on-the-job evaluation and support, principal supervision, which is we're going to talk about today, leader tracking systems and sustainability. Today's webinar is going to focus on the 5th domain, the principal supervisor. But we are learning a few things, and this week, the Wallace Foundation will be releasing 3 new reports regarding the principal supervisor work that they have been doing with 14 districts. But we're going to get a sneak preview of a few of those things that we've been learning in this work, and you'll hear today from our panel members how they're bringing this work to life. But some of the things we're learning is that these supervisors who have smaller spans of control, they're not supervising 25 or 30 principals, maybe more like 15. They get to spend more time and more intense time visiting their principals, talking with their principals. And we also are learning that there's a more coherent approach now to supporting principals that provides a lot more training, and this training is aligned to what the expectations are and the supervisor's role. We're also learning that if we spend more time on targeted walkthroughs, principal coaching, and developing coherence across school visits, that we'll see improved practice of principals. And we need that the principals report that they have a different perception of the support they're receiving from their central office and the practices and the effectiveness of their principal supervisors. Now, I highly encourage you, next slide, to align your principal supervision model for your district to the model standards for principal supervisors. There are 8 standards. There are 4 on this slide and 4 on the next. But these standards are a framework and a foundation for the work that principal supervisors are doing to support principals as instructional leaders. You can find these standards and the document that goes with them that gives a lot of information and some examples on the website for the National Policy Board for Ed Administration website, and we'll put that address in our Q&A. Okay. So at this time, I would like to introduce my colleague and friend, Gary Bloom. We've built some foundation. You've met our panelists. We've built some research base for you to think about. We've given you some framing questions that we hope we're going to answer. And now Gary is going to moderate some questions with our extraordinary guest today. Gary, I'm turning it over to you.
Got it. Okay, hopefully everybody can hear me now and see me. We're really pleased to have our panel with us this morning and our participants. A little bit of logistical input before we get going. We welcome questions from participants, either directed as individuals and individual panelists or general questions. You can post your questions in the Q&A box, and to the extent that time permits, we will attempt to get to them. We're going to be directing some of these questions at individual panelists and then inviting other panelists to chime in. We'll take it from there. So we're going to start with a question for Edwin. Edwin, this work is all about supporting principals as instructional leaders. Tell us a bit about your thoughts around what principal instructional leadership looks like in this current environment we're all trying to cope with.
Thank you, Gary, for that question. And let me begin by saying that the work that the Wallace Foundation has been doing with all of us is transformational in nature. And we have a responsibility as leaders to not allow the current environment to get in the way of improving instructional leadership. Everyone in the learning community needs to understand that this is about improving instruction in every classroom, in every school, in every district. And it begins by improving the instructional skills of the leader. So that will be my first response. The second thing that I would say as it relates to improving principal instructional leadership is that the principal supervisor needs to understand that this work is not about demonstrating how much the principal supervisor knows, but it is rather about improving the skills of the principal. The principals are dealing with a great deal of issues in the school. So the sooner we can get the principal to a level where instructional leadership is the driver of the work, the better it will be. The third thing that I will say is that as we do this work, as it relates to supervising principal effectively, one of the things that we need to do is help our principals realize the beauty of effective professional learning communities. So when I think of my district, I think about the fact that I have principals where the majority of the students are multilingual learners. Well, can we make the space for those principals to work together on effective strategies to lead the work? Same thing with principals who are leading schools where we have ICT program or inclusion programs. Can we allow time for those principals to work together in a PLC to determine what good instructional leadership is all about? And then also it's about identifying tools that work. So if we can get principals to work together with principal supervisor to identify tools that will work effectively regardless of the schools in which they find themselves, I think we are addressing instructional leadership. I firmly believe that this current environment will change. It needs to change. Our students require to be back in school the sooner the better. So now more than ever, all of our principals and our principal supervisor needs to realize that we have about a month and a half to do some real transformational work. And it begins by understanding technology. If we are in a distance learning environment, then we need our principals to understand technology. They need to be realistic about what they see in a classroom. They need to learn to be able to do learning walk via Zoom or Microsoft Teams. And more than ever, principal in the next couple of months need to understand how to model best practices. So instructional leadership must be the driver if we are to improve all of our schools at all times. Thank you, Gary.
Thanks very much, Edwin. Narissa, our world has changed, our professional world at the very least, and our personal worlds too, since April. So as things have developed since April, what new challenges are you facing as a principal supervisor, and how has your own supervisor supported you in meeting those challenges?
Thank you. So I'm going to piggyback on something that Edwin said. It is easy to go dark in a remote setting. In this setting, you know, when you're used to being in an office, everyone is accessible in the office, and being in a remote setting can present a variety of challenges. One of those challenges is how and the frequency in which we communicate with those in which we supervise. One of the things that I had to do as a principal supervisor was to adjust the way in which I communicated with those that I supervised and the frequency in which that occurred. For example, one of the things I did was I created a schedule to communicate with each principal. The schedule was created on a day-by-day basis. I shared that information with the principal so that they would know that on Monday, expect a call or a Zoom session with me so that we can talk about any problems or challenges or any questions that they had relating to what to do in this new environment. The other role, I think the most important role of a principal supervisor is to lead learning communities that can help principals grow as instructional leaders. And that's very difficult to do in a remote setting when you're not used to being in that remote environment. So I took that as just a goal of mine to make sure that I constantly found ways to connect my group of principals, to provide an open space for them to share their challenges and solutions. And we did that both through our virtual conversations as well as creating Google Docs, Q&A documents where an individual could pose a question and then we each could respond or provide some suggestions of things that we could do moving forward. The next thing, as we know, just kind of in standard one of the principal model standards for principal supervisors is having that dedicated time to be in contact with your principals or with your school leadership teams. And so one of the things that I had to do in this environment was kind of think about, so now we're in a remote learning environment. You can't just drive to the school and be a part of a conversation, and you can't just walk through the building to see what the students are doing. So I had to create a schedule in which I asked all the principals that I supervised to let me be a part of all of their instructional leadership team meetings so that I could witness what was going on in their schools and be able to provide that feedback as needed. So I think to summarize, the challenges would be just adjusting the way that we do things to fit the remote environment that we're in, continuing to have that dedicated time to support our principals, and then also just making sure that we are communicating and communicating more frequently and providing them with an open space to problem solve.
Can I just ask a follow-up, Narissa? It sounds like in your district, you've been doing a lot of remote work, including facilitating a learning community of principals and dropping in virtually on people's staff meetings and PD. Do you have any plans yet to phase into more face-to-face interaction?
At this point, as a district, we're still in the remote environment. I do think that as we move forward to opening schools, we will have some face-to-face opportunities, and we will continue to be able to do that work in a face-to-face environment. Yes.
Right, Jay, Edwin, anything, either of you want to add to Narissa's comments?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you, Narissa. We've had an opportunity to work on 2 webinars together already, and she's always kind of captured the things that I'd like to say too. But in the model standards for principal supervisors, really standard 5 that talks about coherence is really the key piece. The communication that Narissa was mentioning is so important because everything is changing on a dime. You know, it felt like we were bending the curve. Now we're in another surge because we're not even in the second wave yet. So we have a lot of these things that are very fluid. And to Edwin's point that he mentioned earlier today about instructional leaders, you know, it really exposes in this time of crisis, the teams that you've developed. It's really shown your strengths and it really exposes your weaknesses. So when you have good teams established already, whereas principal supervisors, we are charged with helping our schools and our principals, is that if you have a good connection with your Office of Curriculum Instruction and Professional Development, which is what we call it here in Long Beach, is to ensure that our teachers and our teams and our schools are following the essential learning that we gave out from that department, not the essential assignments that we saw. And it was really hard because we had to finesse. We were closed on a dime. I mean, we didn't know on March 13th that we were closing schools on March 12th. This happened and it was so fast, but we also had to be sensitive to the coaching piece of helping our schools and our teachers and our principals to support that in a way that we were helping communicate. Because one thing that we knew as principal supervisors, even, we have an executive staff level of principal supervisors, then we have directors. Even within those 2 sets of groups, there was a little bit of a communication issue where we felt like as an executive staff group, as we were meeting with principals, our principal supervisors or directors below us sometimes did not know of some of the things that we had just kind of on even spur of the moment with updates, weren't included in that communication piece that became a vacuum where we had to do a better job as supervisors or principal supervisors in that standard 5 of coherence, of keeping those lines of communication going in that flow of communication that was key, that our superintendent did, that our deputy superintendent did, where they did a lot of videos that went out and we let our students know and our parents know and our teachers know through weekly communication through video. So it would leave less of a burden for our principals to have to do, because as you all know, our schools have our little communities. So as they have to spread the communication of what's going on in the coherence piece, it was a lot easier for us to take over some of those assignments. So again, the critical pieces for sure is that standard 5 of coherence and communication is really essential. So, and Narissa, you hit it right on, is, and always those teams that we have, those teams within teams and all those teams that we're a part of, really making sure that we're talking with all the time, checking in. I think all of us can really attest to the fact that our phones and our emails are going off at all hours of the day and night, of ensuring that, wow, I need to do a better job of communicating that, or wow, that really sparks me to make sure that I message this, or we message this as a district, and we message this as a level office or as principal supervisors, to ensure that if people are asking, it's our way of assuming that they know X, but they're not even at B yet and we're at X. So we have to make sure everyone's caught up. So Narissa, you hit that really dead on. And Edwin, yeah, go ahead. I know you have a comment to make too.
I was just going to say, Jay and everyone, that principal supervisor they need to become extremely effective now more than ever, assessing the knowledge gap of our principals. As you know, they are principals in different spectrum as it relates to technology skills. And we sometimes, principal supervisor, can be very insensitive by assuming that everyone is at the same level. So we very quickly need to assess where a principal is and then provide the support that that principal needs in order for them to move the agenda in their respective schools.
You know, I think you've hit on, all 3 of you, an important point from my perspective, and that is that this current crisis has shifted our conversations a bit more towards the logistical and the pragmatic issues and concerns. And the notion of standard 5 of coherence and communication is essential just to keep things flowing and just to find ways to attempt to meet the student needs in this current situation. Yet at the same time, several of you have used the word coaching in your remarks, and this next question is for Jay. That the model principal supervisor standards talk about the role of the principal supervisor as a coach. So what does coaching look like in a virtual environment? What does coaching look like in this situation in which we're grappling with logistics as much as we're grappling with what a quality instructional program looks like? What have your expectations of the coaching that your principal supervisors are expected to do shifted at all? And and what does that coaching look like?
Yeah, I think, you know, because we become the coaches and mentors, and even, you know, to some degree, the psychologists of some of our principals as principal supervisors, we have to be able to be the support mechanisms for our principal supervisors also, because they're dealing with certain principals. As we all know, we have these certain school sites and principals that we love working with, right? Because they can figure things out, they're innovative, they're creative, they're problem solvers. And then we have those that are, woe is me, I don't know how, we can't do this. And it takes a toll on principal supervisors to be able to provide that differentiated support. And we have to, as a principal supervisor group, really help each other with supporting one another. The one thing that I will comment is, it's really nice for that coherence piece to be able to talk cross level. You know, even though I'm over high schools, and the director in our office is under me, and I supervise him, it's nice to be able to do cross level conversations and meeting together as a principal supervisor group. Of ensuring that we're all kind of helping each other out, being able to have that unique position that we have that we can't really share or vent to anybody because no one understands the work you do unless you're able to talk with other principal supervisors. So again, the luxury of being able to talk amongst the 7 of us, to be able to really talk about what are the things that you're saying or doing, forms of communication that work for you. As we start to ease up the restrictions of being able to meet in person, we have that comfort level, not comfort level of being in person or being meeting via Zoom. And one thing that I'll share really quickly with all of you is we've had conversations with our local health department on just now, being able to have our athletes come back for conditioning, not workouts, not tryouts, not anything else, but conditioning. And we laid out a really good plan with our Southern Section Commissioner of Athletics. We've talked with our health officials, and it's the second day of everybody pretty much coming back. And that's inundated our offices and our city health departments, and everyone's complaining here and there. There's no social distancing. So even that kind of a therapeutic session day that we were going to have today with this webinar, I've been inundated, and my phone still keeps going off of this school's not doing this school's not doing that. And so I can just imagine what it's going to be like when we come back to school with our students, our parents, our teachers, our principals, of how they're going to feel as far as comfort level of students coming back. The safety, number one, of everyone that's going to be back at our school sites, the instruction that's going to have to happen there too, and just kids being kids, right? Of having maybe inappropriate masks to not wanting to wear a mask, and what happens then. We really have to kind of slow this ship down to really talk about all these things that are potentially going to come up, because it's going to inundate us. And for the most part, as we all know, most of our school staffs are on summer vacation, summer break. So we're the ones, as you see Edwin in his office, and we talked about it before we met for the webinar, a lot of us have been accustomed to being in our offices, but most of us have not been. So there's a lot of those pieces that we have to ensure and remind each other all the time that this person's going to text, this person's going to call. Why is the city health department calling my office? What's happening now? What did a school do? Who tattletaled? That kind of thing that happens there too. There's a lot of those issues that we know are happening that we really have to, again, when we close things down, it was easy to just say we're closed and hard to bring back the instruction. Now the anticipation and stress of the second wave and what's going to happen there is really going to be critical, and making sure that we do follow all the support that we can with our coaching sessions and being active communicators with our principal supervisors so they can be support mechanisms for our principals in our sites.
I'm going to invite Edwin and Narissa to follow up, but in your follow-ups, perhaps you could comment on whether your districts have expressed any explicit expectations of principal supervisors in terms of how often they're going to meet in a coaching kind of a conversation with their principals, and whether that's being documented, and if you're following some of the processes you've had in place before C-19.
Let me just begin by saying that all of us need to put our assumptions to the side at this point more than anything. I don't know any principal supervisor that was a principal during a distance learning period in our life before. So I am going to ask all of my principal supervisors to assume that they know nothing about what distance learning is all about. I would rather allow the principals to drive the conversation, because they lived it since March and they had no choice. So that's the first thing I'm going to share with everyone. The second thing that I'm going to share with you is that right now, I am in the middle of redoing my table of organization. And I want to have 3 main principal supervisors, and then I want to have 2 additional principal supervisors that will work with at least 5 principals. And then the others would only work with 9 principals. And the expectations will be that, well, first, my expectation is that we will be together come the middle of August, and that we will be able to speak to each other face to face and learn from each other. But in the absence of that, then the expectation will be that there will be weekly meetings with your PLCs, and that you will set the agenda, and that you will work around 3 main concepts. One is the book that we will be reading for the summer. So what are we learning from that book that we can implement in our school? The second thing will be, what is a specific problem of practice that your school is dealing with in order to become better at what you do? And then the third issue that I would expect my principals in their PLCs to engage in is, let's talk about administrivia or examples of what actually works in our schools in order to move the agenda. So the expectation will be that these meetings will take place weekly if we are in a distance model come September. But I'm hoping that does not happen.
Narissa, any comments?
No, our expectations will continue to be the same, that we do meet with our principals weekly. I think that in this remote environment, that's absolutely necessary to be able to do that and to be able to have those conversations. I agree that the identification of a student learning problem will be essential. The only thing I would probably add is that there will be some expectation for our principals moving forward would be to include some level of social emotional learning and having some things in place to support both students and teachers in this remote environment.
This conversation is a good segue into the next topic I'd like to bring up, and that's the topic of equity. This current situation has brought equity issues into high relief, and in many ways, maybe it's an opportunity for us to be more aggressive in addressing equity issues. Can each of you share some examples of ways in which the principal supervision process in the current environment in which you're trying to bring attention to and take action around equity issues?
Sure, I'd love to.
Where the time is running a bit short, so if you can keep your remarks fairly brief.
Thanks, Gary. You always cut me off. You've always done that with me. No, I'm kidding. Gary and I have worked together for a long time, so I appreciate the support, Gary. No, really, one of the biggest things that I think, especially for high schools, and I think even, you know, when you think of elementary and middle schools, is that concept of what you consider a master schedule, which teachers work with which students. You know, in high school, whether they're GATE or whether they're EL or whether they're special needs students or mainstreaming students, you know, who do you put where and when? And then how many resources do you put into students that have, you know, learning opportunities or learning gaps where we need to put the support in? So for us, the master schedule was the biggest piece for high school. And you know, when you think about this time of crisis or COVID, it really exposes the inequities, because a lot of times when we were meeting with principals as principal supervisors, they were wanting to solve a lot of questions that we finally had to say and stop and say to them 2 things. One, the information that we're sending to you right now is what's right at this current time, because things can change. But 2, we can't solve the inequities that were established prior to COVID. COVID's not going to solve, or our mandates or district-wide, you know, communication is not going to solve the inequities that we have already. So it really opened up, what are the inequities we have now? So as we started to build a master schedule for our high schools to have commonalities, whether wall-to-wall pathways that we have in Long Beach, was we established by the principal supervisor and I going into everyone's master schedule for all of our 14 schools and looking at what can or can't happen again for the following year. Even though we've set explicit guidelines for master schedule, we all know schools try to do this and do this on the side. And so we really went in there and looked at what are the things that our students are going to need, saying this class maybe is not as essential. Let's do a learning opportunity for this. And what that did was looking at making sure that we had all staff to be able to support and lower our class sizes for our most intense students that need the most support, so that we were able to have more teachers working with less amount of students for our students that needed the greatest assistance. So I'll just leave it at that one for now. And I know we have a lot to share in the group.
That's an excellent concrete example. Thanks, Jay. Narissa?
Yep, I'm ready. So I think when we're thinking about equity, we need to look at equity through the lens of a growth mindset. And in our district, we have developed a process which allows us to work with schools teams using a continuous improvement model to monitor student performance, to look to identify practices to improve instruction and student support, as well as to support our principal groups. So that my first thing would be, when you're thinking about equity, you have to think about it through a growth mindset. Secondly, the work that we do is student-centered work. And I think if we keep students at the center of what we do, if we keep students at the center of our decision-making, of any of our programs or instructional practices or anything that we put in place, then we will attack equity head on. But we have to keep our students at the center of everything that we do. And we mentioned earlier a little bit about identifying a student learning problem. I think that the use of the theory of action model to identify a student learning problem, to talk about a teacher problem of practice, as well as a principal problem of practice, is a great starting point if you're looking at some things to do to address equity issues within your district.
So I will provide three very specific examples. The first one is directly related to what I said before, which is stop making assumptions about what families have and do not have. So survey your families, get out there and identify what it is that they need, rather than assuming that, families do not have electronic devices to be able to do distance learning. Well, how do you know that? Did you actually get the information? Find out who has Wi-Fi and who does not have Wi-Fi. If you want to create equity, you first need to understand what's lacking. The second thing that we did here in Yonkers, hopefully implementing it out during the summer, and then in September, is that we created power standards. So what we did for every students from K through 8, we identify what are the standards that are actually 100% required in order for the students to be successful in the next grade level. So I'm hoping to have these documents on the website so that you can all see it by visiting yonkerspublicschools.org. These power standards are phenomenal, and any teacher that wants to assess what the students are, begin by teaching what we call here in Yonkers the power standard. The second thing the third thing as it relates to equity is that as leaders, we need to teach. So it's very difficult to understand what equity is unless you understand what culturally responsive teaching is all about. So this summer, all of the administrators in this district will be reading Culturally Responsive Teaching and the Brain by Soretta Hammond, which I encourage everyone to read, because it will give you a flavor of what it is that needs to be in place for all students in our schools. If we arrive at culturally responsive teaching, then we will have equitable learning environment in our schools.
Excellent, excellent. Well, we're getting to the point where we need to begin to wrap up, and hopefully everyone's going to walk away from this outstanding conversation with some takeaways. So could each of you share one or two resources or pieces of advice that could be takeaways for supervisors or principal supervisors as we face the coming months, the difficult times that may lie ahead, or challenging times at least that lie ahead for us? Why don't we start with Jay?
Sure. Thank you. First of all, I'll share that I think our attendees should look at all three of our districts' websites to look at the resources that we put out for not only just parents and students, but teachers also. I think they're, again, even if it's something that's repetitive, but I think we could all learn from one another for sure. And that's what we've been doing as a district, is to look at each other's websites to just kind of get a glimpse of what other people are doing to get really good ideas. And I think those have been really essential and key and critical for us. But the other part that I will tell our principal supervisors is to go to the schools and be an active part of any engagement that we have with our community members. So when we are able to call in teachers or Zoom in with teachers or call in students and parents, be a part of your school's community as you bring folks back, because there's a lot of SEL trauma of this COVID, but there's also civil unrest that has happened in our communities out of everything that's happened globally too. So we have two big traumatic things that have happened in our country in the last few months. that our students are having to come back to and cope with, our adults need to come back and cope with too, in a safe way, to be able to feel like they, there's some sense of normalcy, but also a sense of equity, not only in our system as a school system, but also in our communities that they're a part of, that they still face every single day based on what they look like and everything else that happens. So we want to make sure that our principal supervisors are there. I think it really helped us in this time of COVID, when we shut down, that we were there giving out Chromebooks, as Dr. Quesada was saying. We were there giving out meals at different school sets, and we were present, so they can see that we were there to support in a time of, hey, I didn't know that I should be that close to a student. I don't have a mask on, don't have gloves on. So with anything that I can share with principal supervisors is, be a part of the school community, bringing back and being a part of and getting the tone and sense of what's going on. We've had advisory groups that have been meeting the last few weeks of what the return of school should look like. And I would advise people to be able to bring in stakeholders as much as possible. And don't forget your teachers. I mean, your teachers need to be a part of this too, because they're the ones that are going to be the frontline workers of dealing with the transition of students in classrooms, transition of students during passing period. It's going to be when you think about what an administrator has to go through, they at least can go into his or her office. Teachers have to be in classrooms in public settings all the time. So make sure your teachers are okay also.
Edwin, any resources or advice to share in closing here?
Well, I mean, very quickly, we all have school visit feedback and rating form. I know we have all of those available. If not, Jackie wouldn't be working with us. So what I would suggest is use that tool, I'm assuming that we all have summer school going on in our district, but if we don't, I can facilitate you entering some of those classes. Use the tool to evaluate distance learning, whether you are using Microsoft Teams or you are using Google Classroom. Get into that class, use the school visit feedback and rating form, and figure out how will you evaluate that visit, that lesson, so that you can practice, so that you can assess what's going on, so that you can determine what works and what doesn't work. And then go back to your principal supervisor and your principals and say, okay, let's figure out how is it that we are going to observe good instruction if we are using distance learning as the modality for September. But we need to use what we have. Let us stop coming up with new tools. We have excellent tools in all of our district. Let's utilize them and then add the distance learning component to the conversation.
Thank you, Edwin. Narissa?
So my advice would be, and I'm sorry, Jay, because you're going to hear this again, would be to be fast, fluid, and flexible. And I think on last week's webinar, someone commented on being factual. So being fast and making sure this is not a time for us to procrastinate. We're all leaders, whether you're leading in a remote environment or leading in a school building. You're a leader, and we have to move forward with making those decisions. Being fluid, meaning that we are considering all possible outcomes and bringing everyone to the table to share whatever expertise they may have on a particular subject that we are discussing. Being flexible, going back to what Edwin said, assume nothing. Be flexible with your principals, be flexible with your with your district office staffs and teams, and just being willing to monitor and adjust as needed as the situation changes. So fast, fluid, and flexible.
Outstanding. Well, I want to thank all three of you for sharing your perspectives and your outstanding work. And I'm going to take the risk of suggesting that anybody in the audience who is looking for more follow-up or contacts with any of you should feel free to contact you or contact your districts, and certainly to visit your district's websites. Jackie has a few more things to share as we wrap things up.
Wow, what a great discussion. Well, as you just heard from these outstanding panel district leaders, they are creating a variety of tools and resources to support the work they're doing with principals. Just amazing ideas. So Gary and I would like to share a toolkit that we developed in collaboration with supervisors of principal supervisors that were engaged in the Wallace Foundation's Principal Supervisor Initiative. The coaching-based supervision for principal supervisor toolkit does include a variety of tools that we recommend when planning for meetings with principals, whether those meetings be face-to-face in the future or whether they continue to be virtual. the tools in this toolkit are relevant and they're available to you. So some of the examples in this toolkit are introductory information about what coaching-based supervision looks like. There's a terrific assessment of principal supervisors that's really helpful in the principal supervisor identifying his or her own growth areas for professional learning. And one of the things we've learned from this work is the importance of selecting individuals with the skills and knowledge to supervise principals. So there's materials in here for the induction and continued professional development of principal supervisors. There are planning tools for meetings, a supervisory log, providing feedback and direction, and observation templates. I will be putting in the Q&A link a shared document that you can download of this toolkit and that you can use, and feel free to use it. The template actually has these tools in a Google Doc and in a Microsoft Word document so that you can adapt them for your own district. So Gary and I are giving you permission to use these and change them as you need to for your district. Okay, so next slide. So I would like to, number one, remind you that the next webinar provided by Digital Promise will be Thursday, July 9th at 1:00 p.m. And that will be, the topic is how NASSP, that's the National Association for Secondary School Principals, were able to convert a live event to a virtual event in just 4 days. And you do not want to miss Dr. Bev Hutton and Megan Park, who talk about how they quickly collaborated with a team to put on this virtual event with such a short timeline. And at this time, I would just like to say on behalf of Gary and I that we want to thank you all for attending this webinar, and to thank our outstanding panelists, Edward Casada from Yonkers School District, Narissa Lewis from Greenville County Schools, and Jay Camarino from Long Beach Unified School District. The work that they're doing to support principals is actually extraordinary. So Gary, are there any final words that you might have?
Let me just once again thank our panelists and thank the participants and invite folks to follow up if any of us can be of any further assistance to any of you. I'll just say personally, as somebody who's a retired superintendent, my hat goes off to all of the educators who are struggling with the challenges we're facing with limited resources and a changing picture from day to day. My hat is off to you, and hang in there.
Yes. Please, there'll be a survey at the end of this webinar that we'd ask you to please complete. And on behalf of this entire team of extraordinary school leaders, we wish you a great rest of the summer and best of luck as you reopen schools for our students. Stay safe, stay well, and continue to keep learning. These webinars are a great way to continue your professional learning.